I really appreciate it. I'm Wallace Chapman. I'm back Monday afternoon, 3:45. Lisa Owen, check.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere aki nei, put the camper van in reverse. Summer holidays in parts of Bay of Plenty could be invite only as COVID spreads. Allegations of sexual assaults on Waikeria Prison inmates and claims a prison officer failed to report them. Is there any chance the Trans-Tasman bubble could get a refloat before Christmas? While COVID's travelling and it's made it to the capital. Old fighters are helping in a new battle to get more Maori on the East Coast vaccinated. Speaking of vax rates, who's joined the 90% club? Aussie's cricket captain falls on his sword over a sexting scandal. Merde, the All Blacks are about to face France, and we'll have a natter about a new chatter of parakeets.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Kia ora, I'm Marama Tipole. The Auckland DHB has become the first in the country to be 90% fully vaccinated. Health officials made the announcement this afternoon after confirming there were 198 new community cases of COVID-19, with most in Auckland. There's one new case and one historical case at the border. Andrew McRae reports.
The new cases include 2 in the Lakes District Health Board region, 6 in Bay of Plenty, 30 in Waikato King Country, 1 in Christchurch and 3 in Northland. 76 people are in hospital, with 6 in either intensive care or HDU, and with the average age of 50. 110 of today's new cases are linked. A construction worker in Wellington has also tested positive for COVID.
The College of Critical Care Nurses is questioning the number of nurses the government says have been trained to help with COVID-19 surge capacity. New Zealand is currently 90 intensive care nurses short. The Health Minister, Andrew Little, acknowledges that, but says 1,400 nurses have been trained so they can step in to help if needed. The college's chair, Tania Mitchell, says while that training is valuable, it's not happening everywhere.
Some DHBs might have 30, other DHBs, the nurses in intensive cares are telling me that they're not seeing any surge training happening. So there is quite a wide range across the country of what's happening, and some areas are definitely underprepared.
Tania Mitchell says those who are doing the training are doing a 4-hour online module, with some DHBs also providing a few days practical training. The Ministry of Health is staying tight-lipped about a trial underway of the new vaccine certificate. The pass will be required to go to places like gyms, bars and restaurants once the country moves into the traffic light system. Hamish Cardwell has more.
The gym Les Mills is part of the trial and started testing the technology with vaccinated volunteers in Wellington this week. The Ministry of Health says the large numbers of people trying to sign up for the vaccine pass when it was launched on Wednesday caused hacking controls to kick in, but it's now working well. It says hundreds of thousands of people have registered. The Ministry declined to provide more information about the pass trial. However, it's understood the government is also considering a test run that would allow Auckland hairdressers and beauty salons to open as soon as next week, using the passes.
A Bodiroa doctor is desperately hoping a vaccine for strep throat will prevent children and teenagers developing rheumatic fever and heart disease. The government today announced $10 million of funding will be allocated to researchers to develop the vaccine. Annie Judkins says someone with rheumatic heart disease walks into her clinic every week, and it almost exclusively impacts Maori and Pasifika children.
We see loads of patients who have got rheumatic heart disease. They've had heart valve replacements as a result of their rheumatic heart disease. We've got group A strep nephritis, which goes on in some people to cause renal failure.
According to Ministry of Health data, Maori and Pasifika are 4 times more likely to be hospitalised with the disease. 2 people are dead after a boat got into difficulty in Bluff harbour this afternoon. 2 others were taken to Southland Hospital in a critical condition. Timothy Brown has more.
Emergency services were alerted to a boat in trouble shortly before 12:30. The police, Coast Guard and St John Ambulance immediately launched a rescue operation in the waters between Bluff Port and Tiwai Point. St John took 2 people to hospital where they are now in a stable condition. Police say Maritime New Zealand has been advised of the incident and the police are making inquiries into the 2 deaths on behalf of the coroner. They want to hear from anyone who saw a small boat in Bluff Harbour today or who has CCTV footage of the area.
It's 5:04. New Zealand batting coach Luke Ronke says only a few minor tweaks are needed for a reversal of fortunes for tonight's second T20 against India in Ranchi. India won the first game with 2 balls to spare, and Ronke says the Indians showed how New Zealand need to start their innings.
We have to take a leaf from their book. I think the way they used the power play and after the power play, that sort of first 10 overs, the way they played some of their shots was pretty impressive, and that's sort of something we need to keep doing ourselves. We've got the firepower at the top. We're just got to keep continuing on with it.
Meanwhile, Australia's Test captain Tim Paine has stepped down from the role following a Cricket Australia investigation into his sending a female co-worker lewd text messages and an inappropriate photo 4 years ago. The governing body of women's tennis says it's prepared to pull tournaments out of China if they're not satisfied with the response to the sexual assault allegations made by Peng Shuai. Peng hasn't been seen in public since accusing a former vice premier of China of sexual assault. The Chinese government haven't commented on the allegation. Concern about her safety and whereabouts has grown, with the governing body, the WTA, calling for an investigation. Midfielder Alex Rufer has been named as captain of the Wellington Phoenix for the A-League football season. He's the first homegrown player to lead the side, with the Phoenix kicking off their season against Macarthur FC in Sydney on Sunday night. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, a big week for COVID spread and control in New Zealand. Dr. Chris Smith is back to survey the pandemic, and I'll talk to a scientist who says groupthink has prevented the lab leak theory of COVID's origins being properly investigated. We're marking 100 years of radio this week. James Cridland on whether the medium has a future. And few people are faced with the health decisions theatre director Sophie Roberts has had to make. Her personal and professional resilience are remarkable. Call Kim Hillaho. Join me Saturday morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. For Northland, fine, but isolated evening showers both today and tomorrow. The western North Island from Auckland to Wellington, including Coromandel and Taumarunui, mostly fine, some areas of cloud. For Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taihapea, also Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, generally fine with a few areas of cloud. However, isolated afternoon and evening showers both for today and tomorrow, some possibly heavy with thunderstorms for today. Bulla, Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine, some areas of cloud from this evening. Otago and Southland, fine with increasing high cloud today. Scattered rain developing tomorrow morning. For Western, cloud increasing, isolated showers developing, turning to rain south of the glaciers tomorrow morning with some heavy falls. And for the fjord, mostly cloudy, a few showers about the fjords, turning to rain everywhere tonight. Some heavy falls for tomorrow. And for the Chatham Islands, partly cloudy. It's 5:07.
Thank you, Marama. Tēnā koutou katoa. No mai haere mai ki checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Chuck the camper van in reverse, because summer holidays could be invite-only in parts of Bay of Plenty and the East Coast. Te Whānau-ā-Apanui iwi says it wants to welcome whānau home for Christmas, but it's worried COVID will squeeze the fragile health system. There are 6 new cases in the Bay of Plenty today, taking the region's total to 7. A local school linked to one of the cases has been closed today, and all students and staff are being offered tests. The prospect of more cases emerging once Aucklanders are set free from lockdown has the iwi putting out its own Christmas wish list, including a polite request. Ko taku manuhiria nai nei, ko Lui Rapihana no Te Whānau-ā-Apanui. Lui is also an Opotiki District Councillor. Tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe, Lisa, o tērā koutou e whakarongo mai rā.
Can you tell us what is your request to holidaymakers?
Our request to holidaymakers for this summer season is to travel safely. And part of that safety is to ensure that they are tested before they actually leave their home or the place of residence that they live in and travel Aotearoa wide, but especially through to us in Te Whānau-ā-Apanui, which is one of our busiest times of the year. understandably, because the sun is shining and everyone wants to enjoy the ocean.
So, in the media statement released today, it says that you're asking holiday makers who do not whakapapa to Te Whānau-ā-Apanui to refrain from entering tribal territories this summer. So, who does that cover?
That covers everyone who doesn't have bloodlines to Te Whānau-ā-Apanui lands, and the lands are from Hawaii right through to Portakirua, which is the longest coastline within the Portakirua district. And that's to ensure the safety of not only our people at home, but those that are travelling as well.
And normally, what kind of influx would you get from visitors, people who do not whakapapa to Whānau-ā-Apanui?
Normally, we would get a huge influx. We have a lot of freedom camping sites within Te Whānau-ā-Apanui that are operated by the District Council, and those are generally full with a lot of people 2 weeks out of Christmas and quite often a month after Christmas.
So, Louis, you are respectfully asking them to please stay away?
Respectfully, with all good intentions. But as you know, it's for their safety as well as the safety of the people in Te Whānau-ā-Apanui.
And what kind of response do you think you're going to get to that?
We'll probably get a mixture of responses because we have a lot of people who do travel down and have done for 30, 40 years to camp along the beachside and enjoy the ocean and the kaimoana that the ocean provides. But we just ask respectfully that this time, until we get better understanding of Delta or our nation gets a better control of the situation, that we try and refrain from it. But if we do, please try and ensure that there's some safety measures in place by getting tested and ensuring you aren't COVID positive before travelling out of your home.
Are you going to call on campers and just have a word with them if they do turn up?
Absolutely. There is some group of people that will be going around and just checking up on them and seeing what it is, but there won't be any friction whatsoever from our people, but just saying, hey, these are what the iwi are looking at and what the iwi are requesting peacefully, and ask them if they can please follow those guidelines.
So what about people who've got events planned?
Yep, that's been a huge one, and that's been a lot, especially for our marae. A lot of the marae are used for the big events like weddings, birthdays and everything else. Those have all been postponed for the summer period, and they've been asked to either find alternative locations and or we work with each other and come up with the best practice for those events to go forward, whether they be restricting numbers, then also looking at the invitation list and getting their guests to ensure that they are either double vaccinated or tested before they come to the venue.
Louis, again, is that about manuhiri? Is that about guests from outside the region coming in for those big events and potentially bringing COVID with them?
Absolutely. That's everyone from outside of Te Whānau-ā-Apanui coming in, even our own whānau that are looking forward to coming home, and we're looking forward to having them home. We want to ensure that they are safe to come home and that we have the ability to look after them while they are here.
Is that an awkward conversation, Louis? Because are you saying to them, we'd really like you to stay away if you are not double vaccinated and if you cannot provide a negative COVID test?
Absolutely. It's always difficult to make those calls as a people and to have those conversations with our own especially. But, we have to make those calls at some stage to ensure the safety of everybody.
So what kind of vaccination rates do you want in your area to be comfortable with outsiders coming for a holiday or a break?
We have a high vaccination rate already as it is. We're already in the 90s within Te Whānau-ā-Apanui borders. But even though we have that high vaccination rate, it's not just about that. It's also about our health system not being able to cope with anyone from outside should they come here, fall positive, and then we have to take care of them here on the ground.
You're also an Opotiki district councillor, and I suppose tourists and people coming into the region bring money. Have you had any feedback from the council or for local businesses about this request?
Absolutely, and it's, surprisingly it was the local businesses who approached us first as the iwi response unit in regards to wanting to put best practices in place for them, but to also ensure that everyone is safe that comes into the iwi, because the last thing they would want to do is for us to go into either a level 4 lockdown or a red lockdown, wherever we're sitting at with the new traffic system or the levels of the nation there. They'd rather turn away minimum business or as little as much rather than closed for the entire summer season.
And so this request, just to be clear, extends for the entire summer period, does it?
That's correct.
Really appreciate your time tonight, Louis. That is Louis Rapihana from Te Whānau-ā-Apanui, politely requesting that if you do not whakapapa to the area, please stay out of their tribal territories over summer. Let us know what you think. Text us on 2101, tweet us at checkpoint.rnz. Delta's long tentacles keep reaching further and further. There are cases in Auckland, Waikato, Bay of Plenty, Lakes, Mid-Central, Wairarapa and Canterbury. And now it might have re-emerged in Wellington. A weak positive result in a construction worker who transferred from Auckland to the capital has put health authorities on high alert. Meanwhile, construction industry leaders are begging the government to mandate vaccination for their workers. It all comes on a day where, once again, nationwide positive case numbers are nudging the 200 mark. Hamish Cardwell reports.
While COVID spreads through the upper North Island, Wellington has somehow escaped essentially unscathed. But positive cases are creeping ever south. And this afternoon, a rumour circulating for days was confirmed. After months, a positive case in the capital. On the streets of Wellington, it was met with resignation.
It's just inevitable, isn't it, really?
Yeah, no, it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, if it happens, it happens.
I think it's just a matter of time.
The Health Ministry says the weak positive result, which was picked up during routine surveillance testing, could be a historical case or someone in the earlier stages of infection. The Auckland-based construction company the man works for, Heb Construction, says he is not symptomatic and is double vaxxed. Wellington Mayor Andy Foster says the man has fewer than 10 contacts, with them working outdoors on an inner suburb reservoir, which also lowers the risk. While this case is not cause for undue alarm, he agrees COVID will soon reach the city.
It's going to happen. We are going to end up with a situation where COVID does arrive. We know that. It's just a matter of time. And we've all got to keep on getting vaccinated. Wellingtonians have been absolutely spectacularly good at that.
This Wellington man says the spectre of another lockdown is very worrying.
If it comes back, hospitality is going to have to shut down again, which means I'm stuck at home all the time, which is not good. Not good for my mental health anyway.
Wellington has one of the country's highest vaccination rates, but it is much lower in places like Porirua, which also has a higher number of vulnerable Māori and Pasifika people. That concerns this Wellington woman.
Obviously, it would be great to be at the 90% all over, especially like Māori and Pasifika communities. If there was to be an outbreak with the lower vaccination rates, they're probably going to be disproportionately affected. So that's definitely a big concern.
Business Central Chief Executive Simon Arkis says the case is part of the Corona coaster. Not unexpected, but will definitely raise anxiety levels.
When you know it's Delta and when you know how quickly Delta goes, you do have a bit of trepidation, and I know that businesses particularly will be thinking, what does this mean for us?
He says it's an opportunity for people to make sure their systems are shipshape.
It's a really good opportunity for business to say, look, how prepared are we, to double check, to make sure all the things are in place that perhaps we've got used to not doing so much, and to just be ready to face it.
Simon Arkis says businesses are calling for cheap, rapid saliva testing to be finally made widely available and more surveillance testing. That's seconded by the Building Industry Council Chief Executive Graham Burke. He says the industry has been worried from the start about its potential to fuel a major outbreak.
We have large sites where we have multiple people mingling in the same areas and a lot of indoor work. And we also have, specialist trades that move from site to site or are working in people's private homes and occupied buildings. So, we are more prone than most, and there is that potential to spread.
Mr Burke says the Building Industry Council and others wrote to the government asking for it to mandate vaccination in the industry, but has yet to receive a response. Time will tell whether Wellington's luck will hold. Meanwhile, there were 198 new community cases of COVID-19 reported today. More than 150 in Auckland, 30 in Waikato, with the rest spread around the North Island and one in Canterbury.
It is 18 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarongo mai. Thanks for listening. E haere aki nei. Coming up, allegations that sexual assaults in Waikeria Prison were ignored. Mid-Central DHB has joined the 90% club today, reaching the milestone for first doses. But vaccine rates in rural areas of the catchment are still lagging behind, prompting a specific push this weekend to get them tracking in the right direction. Our reporter Jimmy Ellingham joins us now from Pongaroa in the Tararua district. Hey Jimmy, what's happening down there?
Good evening, Lisa. I'm at the Pongaroa Hotel, where, as well as Friday night drinks, we have a vaccination clinic operating. They're expecting about 30 locals in here this evening, and it's run by the Mid-Central DHB and local iwi. As you say, to get that push in rural areas up, the Tararua district is lagging behind that 90%. It's at about 86% for first doses.
So, captive audience at the pub, eh?
Exactly. Yes. There's people here coming in to have a shot and then go and have a drink or a meal on Friday nights, and that's the idea apparently, to take these clinics out to the people. People I've spoken to here have said that they probably would have got a injection anyway, but the fact that it's come to them makes it so much easier than driving into town. Palmerston North is 90 minutes away, but there's also Pahiatua and Woodville a bit closer.
So, Jimmy, are they telling you anything about why they kind of haven't got moving faster, people getting their jabs?
Well, everyone here is being a vaccination clinic, everyone here is actually here obviously to get vaccinated, and people in the pub who aren't part of that, everyone I've spoken to is fully vaccinated. So these people here aren't the ones that are lagging behind that, but it's probably to do with accessibility, the health workers say. For example, today they went to a forestry site in rural Tararua. Many of those people perhaps may not have been able to easily access a vaccination clinic otherwise.
Thanks for your time, Jimmy. Jimmy Ellingham, who's joining us from Pongaroa in the Tararua district there, where over the weekend there's going to be a big push to get their vaccination numbers up. It is 5:20. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Bars and restaurants are gearing up for a busy weekend in Hamilton, but as COVID restrictions squeeze serving space, they want bigger borders around where they can sell booze. Waikato's back at level 2, and many hospitality outfits are expanding their outdoor spaces to boost seating numbers. But that doesn't mean that their liquor licence extends too, meaning some tables can have a beer and others can't. Now they want the government to step in and help as they desperately try to recoup costs from lost lockdown earnings. Reporter Louise Tanuth and Marika Habazi report from Hamilton.
The sun's out in Hamilton and locals are soaking it up, along with some level 2 freedom at last. For hospitality, it's come during what would usually be the busiest time of year, so to catch up on months of business, they're hoping to move tables and chairs to seat more people outside, thanks to the local council. But they'll need a liquor licensing extension to serve drinks, and that's got to come from government. Banh Mi Cafe already has access to some outdoor dining, but the numbers have been lost under spacing restrictions.
We've actually lost 4 tables, and we've lost around 14 to 16 seats. The other restriction that we have now also is we have to have spacing for the staff to be able to walk through in between customers, and also for the customers to have a walkway as well. So yeah, it's not great.
That's owner Anne Chamontry. She says they'd love a bit of extra room to gain these numbers back, but without their licence, things get difficult.
In this border here, we've got our liquor licence and things like that. So if we were to extend that border out, even just by a metre, then the people that are sitting on the other side of that metre wouldn't actually be able to have a drink.
And she's worried about her staff's well-being, who will be dealing with the customers' confusion around things. Round the corner at Mr Pickle's Bar and Eatery, Matt Pedley is echoing the enthusiasm for some more room.
If we sit 120 usually and another 40, that would be amazing. If you think about going into the summer period, we've missed October, part of November, that lead up into Christmas. We have made the decision not to take any large Christmas group bookings to give our regular clientele the opportunity to come in and enjoy us before we close for Christmas, because we will.
Especially since they didn't even open for takeaways before now, so this is their shot at getting a boost before Christmas. These locals are enjoying the natural ventilation sitting outside to eat and drink brings.
Just having more space to sit and kind of have a bit more space away from people. Yeah, no, I've already seen it down Grey Street. The cook had opened out and put some of the tables and chairs in the steel park there. I think it's a great idea.
But they're scratching their heads when it comes to which tables may or may not be able to have a drink in the future.
It's just kind of more frustrating for the people working there, like keeping tabs on who can drink at what tables.
You know, if one table's got one and the other table can't have one, really not going to work, is it?
Furnace Steakhouse is just one of John Lawrenson's 7 businesses here in Hamilton. He says now is all about making up for lost time. Outdoor dining extensions are crucial for that.
For a lot of businesses at the moment, it's not just about getting back to being able to do 70 or 80% of what you might normally do. We need to be doing 100 or even 110 or 120% of what we would normally do, just to try to get back to, you know, where we were 3 months ago.
But without their liquor licence, it won't be worth it.
If we can sell a couple of glasses of wine or a bottle of wine to a customer who's having a meal, then that's where we make a lot of our margin.
He's hoping their calls will be heard from the Ministry of Justice, who's in charge of the Liquor Licensing Act, with this message for them.
It's a stroke of a pen. And people need to be honest about what kind of drinking we're talking about here. You know, this isn't 18-year-olds torpedoing vodka cruises.
The Restaurant Association, Heart of the City and Hospitality NZ have sent a proposal to the Minister of Justice, Chris Whānau, in the hopes they'll see some changes to the Sale and Supply of Liquor Act. Vanessa Williams, General Manager of the Hamilton Central Business Association, says they've done it before, so they can do it again.
Are reliant on having that Act change, and we know it's been done before. We saw it in 2015 and 2019 with support for the Rugby World Cup. So the rule book doesn't need to be rewritten, but we would really like to see it being implemented again and quickly, because time is moving.
Minister of Justice Chris Whānau has acknowledged the association's support of changing the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act and the hardships hospitality is facing, and says he's talking to colleagues about the issue. But there's no indication it'll be given the green light.
And you can check out the video that goes with Marika and Louise's story on our webpage. Homai o whakaaro, would love your feedback. Nō reira ānei na kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. What do you think about liquor licensing rules? Outdoor dining is becoming more important with COVID. Restaurants there wanting to expand the areas that they can serve drinks. Should they be allowed to? Also, let us know about the Bay of Plenty iwi, politely asking people who don't whakapapa to the area to stay away this summer because of concerns about the spread of COVID. Pātui mai. Text me on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Australia's Test cricket captain Tim Paine has resigned in the last hour. After it emerged he's been involved in a sexting scandal. Tim Paine was investigated for sending a former Cricket Tasmania employee an explicit photo and lewd messages 4 years ago. He says while no breach was found, he was aware the issue was about to become public, so he's chosen to step down as captain.
On reflection, my actions in 2017 do not meet the standard of an Australian cricket captain or the wider community. I'm deeply sorry for the hurt and pain that I've caused to my wife, my family and to the other party.
Paine became captain in 2018 in the wake of Sandpaper Gate when 4 players, including then-captain Steve Smith, were stood down for ball tampering against South Africa.
I've loved my role as captain of the Australian cricket team, and it's been the greatest privilege of my sporting life to lead the Australian men's test team. I'm grateful for the support of my teammates and proud of what we've been able to achieve together. To them, I ask for their understanding and forgiveness. To Australian cricket fans, I'm deeply sorry that my past behaviour has impacted our game on the eve of the Ashes. For the disappointment I have caused to fans and the entire cricket community, I apologise.
The father of 2 says he spoke to his wife and family at the time of the incident and he's grateful for their forgiveness.
And it breaks my heart to know how much that I've let them down. They have always stood by me, been my most loyal fans, and I'm indebted to them for their support.
Australian cricketer there, Tim Paine. The All Blacks and Black Ferns are in very unfamiliar territory, with both sides hoping to bounce back from losses and end the international season on a high with wins over France. I'm joined now by sports editor Stephen Hewson. Well, Stephen, bit of a bombshell in cricket, but let's talk about, well, our teams and what's going on. Surely we can't have another weekend of losses for both the All Blacks and the Black Ferns.
Well, you'd hope not, Lisa, but I mean, history suggests the All Blacks will go okay. I think that they've won 14 tests on the trot against France. I think the last loss to France came in 2009. But that score against Ireland, it flattered the All Blacks. That loss, I mean, 29-20. I mean, the Irish could have put on 40 points against them. So France, on the other hand, well, they've had some patchy performances. They had some wins over Ireland and Wales in the Six Nations, but they lost to England and Scotland. So, that, and then they sent a second string, you might remember, a second string side to Australia earlier this year, and they lost 2-1 to the Wallabies, but they put up a good performance there with that second string lineup. So I think this one is in the balance. I mean, you've looked at All Black coach Ian Foster. He's rung the changes. He's made 7 changes to that team that lost to Ireland, and he's hoping that the return of the likes of Sam Cane and Aaron Smith are going to bring a bit of enthusiasm to the side.
This particular block, it's our 5th test in a row, and before that we've had another 5 tests in a row. Delighted with the depth, but I think for this game here we really felt that the team just looked a little bit off the mark last week, and bringing some fresh legs in is exactly what we need.
Well, fingers crossed there. And then there's the Black Ferns, and they're staring down the barrel of 4 straight losses. Can they turn things around?
Well, they might be world champions, but they went into this Northern Hemisphere to a very much underdone. Remember, they hadn't played a test for more than 2 years. England and France, meanwhile, have been playing Six Nations rugby and a whole lot more domestic rugby than what the Black Ferns had. So hopefully, from a Black Ferns perspective, they can narrow the gap against France on Sunday. But France, you'd have to say, are still very much favourites to win. The other factor to be considered is that, it's less than a year out from the World Cup, which is going to be held in New Zealand next year. And that can the Black Ferns get enough match play and make the catch-up they need over those likes of those Northern Hemisphere teams.
And also hoping to return to winning form. Overnight, the Black Caps play India, second T20. What are our expectations there?
Well, narrow loss in game 1, so the Black Caps need to win overnight to keep that match or that series alive. T20, it's a bit of a lottery though, so it could go either way. Game 3's on Monday morning if they manage to keep things alive. So hopefully that will go down to a decider. Then of course they head into 2 tests against India, which start on Thursday next week. Just a note too, football, the A-League gets underway this weekend. The Phoenix, they play Macarthur FC in Sydney on Sunday evening.
Thanks, Stephen. Busy weekend for sports lovers. Fill your boots. That was Stephen Hewson, our sports editor there. E te iwi e haere nei e o checkpoint, a chance for descendants of the Maori Battalion to connect the past with the present and protect themselves from COVID. We hitch a ride with a carpooling service, and here's something to tweet about. Some cool chicks arrive at Auckland Zoo. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or our email address is checkpoints@rnz.co.nz. It is time now for the headlines. Anea Marama, Mena Pita Pita Kōrero.
Me take maata. Thank you, Lisa. The Auckland DHB has become the first in the country to be 90% fully vaccinated. There are 198 new community cases of COVID-19 today, with most in Auckland. A construction worker in Wellington has also tested positive. The College of Critical Care Nurses is questioning the number of nurses the government says have been trained to help with COVID-19 surge capacity. New Zealand is currently 90 intensive care nurses short. The Health Minister, Andrew Little, acknowledges that, but says 1,400 nurses have been trained so they can step in to help if needed. Eastern Bay of Plenty iwi te Whānau-ā-Apanui is asking for those who do not whakapapa to the iwi to refrain from going into their rohe this summer. The iwi is also asking for all those who do go to the region to return a negative test result and do it before travelling because they don't have the capacity to test everyone. A Porirua doctor is desperately hoping a vaccine for strep throat will prevent children and teenagers developing rheumatic fever and heart disease. The government today announced $10 million of funding will be allocated to researchers to develop the vaccine. Annie Judkins says someone with rheumatic heart disease walks into her clinic every week and it almost exclusively impacts Maori and Pasifika children. Australia's Test cricket captain Tim Paine has resigned in the last hour after it emerged he's been involved in a sexting scandal. Tim Paine was investigated for sending a former Cricket Tasmania employee an explicit photo and lewd messages 4 years ago. He says while no breach was found, he was aware the issue was about to become public, so he's chosen to step down as captain. And Polish authorities say Belarus has cleared a migrant camp on the border that has been fuelling tensions between Minsk and the EU. More than 1,000 people trying to reach the EU have been moved from the camp to a nearby warehouse. Those are the headlines. Our next news update is at 6.
Kia ora rā e hoa nau mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku hoa e nai nei ko Nona Peltier, who's here to talk business. My food bag, Nona, has made a record half-year profit. This is the food delivery company. Drum roll for the numbers.
9.4 million, and that's versus 7.6 million the year earlier. So even though they had a drop in revenue, and that was mostly because they introduced a new range of products, some of them were cheaper than the ones that had in the past. They revamped their marketing strategy in some ways, and in the end, they achieved more out of less, I guess, if one way of putting it. But they also did better at keeping customers and also attracting higher value customers at the same time. So the outlook's pretty positive. They're going to pay a 3 cents per share interim dividend and are looking to do a little bit better on the second half with that, depending on how things go. So, yeah, basically a pretty good result for my food bag, and certainly the market liked it. Their share price rose 1.7% as a result.
And Nona, what about the retirement village operator Ryman Healthcare? Bottom line profit is up by a third. What's the reason?
Yeah, well, that's mostly in revaluation gains because, of course, they have a lot of retirement villages and they're worth a lot of money. They don't have them just here in Auckland, but throughout New Zealand and as well in Melbourne, Australia. But they said, look, the COVID outbreak has been hard on the company. It's not just the direct costs, there's indirect costs that they've had to absorb, and that's because of supply chain where their construction is concerned. The company has 15 villages in construction at some various stages. And of course, that is being done in Melbourne and Auckland, where both those areas have been under quite lengthy lockdowns and quite strict lockdowns, which has made it really hard to get things done. So even though they made a good net profit of $281.5 million, the market wasn't really that impressed. And that's partly because the company didn't provide any guidance. They were optimistic. But look, they spent $60 million direct costs of dealing with COVID. That's operational costs since the outbreak. And in the last 6 months, they've spent $8 million, and the costs are still going up. They're looking now at other measures they're going to have to bring in as the spread of COVID becomes endemic in the country. Yeah, not just here, but also in Australia.
And how has Friday been on the markets, Nona? Well,
Ryman being a very big company, its share price fell 5%. And so overall, our index, the top 50 index, it fell nearly 0.5%. That was a 60-point drop to 12,740. But the New Zealand dollar, it's steady. The US dollar had a bit of, a little weakness overnight. So anyway, we're steady at just 70.4 US cents. 96.7 Australian, so that's still quite strong, and 52.2 pence.
Thanks, Nona. Ka kite. Have a great weekend. Checkpoint can reveal multiple investigations are underway into allegations of sexual assaults at Waikeria Prison and claims a corrections officer failed to report serious complaints from inmates. 2 prisoners say they were attacked multiple times by other inmates at the men's jail near Te Awamutu in Waikato. It's claimed they reported the assaults to a prison officer more than a month ago. Nothing was done and the sexual attacks continued. The Department of Corrections says it alerted police after it became aware of the allegation earlier this week, and police have confirmed they are now investigating. In a statement to Checkpoint, the department says it's also carrying out a full review into the alleged assaults and the ways in which the men's allegations were managed. The alleged perpetrators have been transferred to another prison site and the victims have also been moved at their request. Amnesty International is part of a collective of organisations concerned about potential human rights breaches in our prisons. Its Executive Director, Meg Duron, joins me now. Kia ora, Meg.
Kia ora, Lisa. Thank you for having me on.
So are you surprised by any of this?
I guess I'm horrified by the allegations, but no, sadly, I'm not surprised. This is consistent with patterns that we've seen and that others have reported on, where not only is harm occurring in prisons to people that are inside, but then the response from corrections exacerbates that harm. So whilst these are allegations at this stage, certainly what we know is that situations like this are not new in our prisons.
What's wrong with the complaints process?
So the complaints process has been broken for a very long time. Corrections conducted an investigation into their process in 2012, but since then very little seems to have changed. So Amnesty International and a range of other organisations, including Just Speak and Professor Tracy McIntosh, took our concerns to Calvin Davis at the start of this year, and they have initiated a review into that complaints process, but we've yet to see any urgent action. So we're really hoping that that happens sooner rather than later.
So how easy is it for a prisoner to make a complaint and be heard?
Yeah, well, I guess there's 2 aspects to this, right? So these issues shouldn't be happening in the first place. And then the second issue is when it does happen, people should be treated humanely. And what we know is that there's been repeated situations in our prisons where the call buttons that are there for prisoners to get help have been turned off by staff, where the PCO1s, which is the complaints form that they use, has been ripped up in front of prisoners or not even recorded that the complaint's been laid, or there just hasn't been any follow-up or action once that complaint process has kicked off. So we do know that there are massive concerns, but I think broader than that, we know that with things like sexual assault, it's almost impossible for people to make a complaint and be heard if they're outside of prisons. So for people who are inside of prisons, there's so much more need for care from corrections staff to ensure that they can report things like this. Because imagine being in a situation where you're locked in with your perpetrator 24 hours a day. So this is a really urgent situation that needs a spotlight from corrections.
The Ombudsman, we know, is conducting a wider review into the prison system. But as you have mentioned, the nature of the prison system is that they're locked down. I mean, how can we and do we know exactly what is going on?
Well, so certainly the Ombudsman's launched an inquiry into the border prison system after multiple inquiries have already occurred. So we already know that there is punitive behaviour happening on the ground and punitive policies in place. So we want to see some urgency from the Minister on these issues. It doesn't need more inquiries. They know the complaints system needs to be fixed. They know that Waikeria Prison has been an issue for a long time. I mean, I was outside Waikeria Prison when the men inside were rioting because they had been ignored for so long. Really, what is happening in New Zealand is we're turning a blind eye to a punitive system that ultimately erodes community for all of us. You don't want people going inside and being further brutalised and coming out worse than they went in. So we do need to see urgent action on this.
OK, Meg, if we've done a ton of investigations and we need urgent action, what's at the top of the list? What are the solutions?
So at the top of the list is listening to Whānau-ā-Apanui and doing Māori-led solutions, community-based solutions and health-based solutions, not punitive approaches. So things like the Minister could come out and rule out cell buster extractions, which is this horrific tactic we heard at the end of last year. They could come out and rule out some of the use of force that's been occurring. They could come out and use language around how people in prisons are humans who deserve to be treated well. But instead we hear quite a lot of punitive talk, as we did when there were the riots in Waikeria, about how these are bad people. So I really think there needs to be a complete overhaul in our approach to one that's based on community and is based on health and wellness.
Ngā mihi, Meg. That is the Executive Director of Amnesty International, Meg Durand there. The Department of Corrections declined to be interviewed on Checkpoint while the police are still investigating. But it says the officer accused of failing to report the attacks left corrections earlier this month for reasons unrelated to this matter. In a statement, Regional Commissioner Terry Buffery says, "I would like to take this opportunity to apologise to the victims of the alleged sexual assaults for any distress that has been caused to them. Every person in prison deserves to be treated with respect and dignity. Ensuring the safety and well-being of people in prison is a core function of corrections and a duty that we take seriously." It is 5:45. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. He muriaki ina pita pita kōrero after the news at 6, a call to reinflate the Trans-Tasman bubble. He kōrero ngā hau tēnei as we rage a war against COVID, a new battle to get vaccine rates up on the East Coast. The descendants of the Maori Battalion are being invited to aerodromes tomorrow to get vaccinated and see light aircraft bearing the names of the C Company soldiers who fought in the Second World War. Nita Blake-Person has the story.
It's a call to arms of a different kind. Orthopaedic surgeon and pilot Chris Hoffman was mid-flight when an idea came to him and friend Mahanga Maru while talking about tackling low vaccine rates.
We came up with this idea that we should try and connect through Mahanga's links with the C Company 28 Maori Battalion. Mahanga's father served in that battalion, in that company, and so we thought it would be a great idea to put the names of those soldiers who served overseas and then fly them around the East Coast and then get their tipuna to come out and connect.
And that idea has become a reality. The sides of Chris's light aircraft now bearing the names of men who fought in World War II. Chris Hoffman hopes it will be as emotional for others as it is for him.
And it's very humbling now to stand in front of the aircraft and see the names of some of those soldiers who put their lives on the line, fighting the tyranny of the day. And all we're asking is that, you know, if you can come and find your forebears, connect with them again, and then do your bit to fight the tyranny of the day, which is COVID.
For Mahanga Maru, a few names stood out.
You can see on here, there's some of my relations, my great uncles, Wānanga Haig, this one here. This is another relation as well on my mother's side, Wātene Haig, both served in the Second World War. Oh, I felt very sad. And reminded me when I was a boy back on the coast. I used to go with my dad to a lot of funerals of a lot of these soldiers in the last post used to be played. So, yeah, I mean, sad, but also, feel a sense of mana that, we get to take these guys home again.
Taking them home, where a new battle is taking place, one against COVID and to get vaccine rates up. In Tairāwhiti, 84% of people have had their first dose, while 72% are fully vaxxed, the second lowest rates in the country. Mahanga says improving that is what this is all about.
Oh, it's really important, without a doubt. Our people at home have their own challenges with getting access to healthcare. A lot of them are challenged background, so getting the message out to protect nephews, uncles, generations to come against COVID and our whakapapa.
So it's hoped the aircrafts will draw the descendants of the Maori Battalion to East Coast aerodromes where vaccinators will be on hand. Those coming by will have to scan their eyes over a few planes to make sure they find their family members.
We've got about 4 aircraft which will have all the names of our tipuna on them. There's 603 soldiers. Their names will be on the different aircraft, so this is one. We've got 3 others that'll be dressed up, if you like.
And it's not just names. Chris Hoffman's added another detail.
The tail of that famous photograph of the sea company Haka from Egypt in the Second World War.
The aircraft won't just be on show.
And people will be able to come for a fly and enjoy.
A chance to lift off and lift vaccine rates.
Tau kia Mahanga and Chris, and if you were listening to that one, do go online and you can see the video that was filmed by Sam Rillstone. It'll be up on our webpage. Fears continue to grow for the safety of a Chinese tennis player since she made sexual assault allegations against a top Chinese official. Serena Williams and other players say the case of Peng Shuai must be investigated and are urging people not to stay silent. The American has posted a photo of the missing star with the hashtag #WhereIsPengShuai. Here's CNN's Ivan Watson.
The royalty of professional tennis expressing concern about the welfare of one of their own.
Honestly, it's shocking, that she's missing.
Warnings echoed by other champions, past and present. I hope Peng Shuai and her family are safe and okay, writes Naomi Osaka, adding, #WhereIsPengShuai. I've known Peng since she was 14, writes Chris Everett. Where is she? Peng Shuai, a Chinese tennis champion,
Peng Shuai moves into the quarterfinals.
Hasn't been seen or heard from in weeks.
This is really extraordinary. A top athlete, 35 years old, a name that a lot of people know, formerly #1 ranked doubles player in the world, just goes missing, gone.
In early November, Peng published an open letter to a former top communist leader named Zhang Gaoli, now aged 75, who Peng accuses of sexually assaulting her after the two had an affair. Why did you have to come back to me, take me to your home to force me to have sex with you, the post reads. Yes, I did not have any evidence, and it was simply impossible to have evidence. CNN cannot independently confirm these allegations, and we've reached out to Peng as well as Zhang and his wife through the Chinese government for further comment with no results. Shortly after the controversial post, Peng's online profile more or less disappeared. What happens when you try to search for people with her name in the Chinese internet? You get the message, no results found. Censors have all but scrubbed this woman from the Chinese internet.
For anyone stuck in traffic right now, this next story might help ease that congestion. A new startup in the capital is trying to fill the almost empty cars that clog New Zealand's roads at rush hour. Our reporter Jake McKee and cameraman Angus Drever gave carpooling a spin.
Carpooling for climate change. This could be the future of some of New Zealand's commute after a startup in Wellington. Hitching a ride has never been easier. A new carpool program is being piloted in Wellington, encouraging people to travel together instead of alone if they're not going to take public transport. It's called Hitch and is the brainchild of Claudia Grave and Todd Foster, born through climate change-focused startup incubator Creative HQ. Claudia says they're on a mission to reduce the number of cars on the road.
1.4 million Kiwis are driving to work, and nearly all of them are driving alone, which is absolutely crazy when we think about the issues that presents with climate change, traffic congestion, the high cost of travel, and the strain on our resourcing and infrastructure.
But why not encourage more people onto buses and trains? Well, Todd says if people loved the bus, they'd already be on it, and he thinks there are smarter ways to use cars.
I mean, there's a million reasons why people use cars, and so, yeah, the flexibility and convenience of it all. So, people might have kids to drop off in the morning, and for various reasons public transport doesn't necessarily work. We know that a lot of people that aren't very well served by active transport, either they live too far away or don't have good access to cycle lanes and that, so they don't feel safe using those kinds of modes.
People sign up online before 7 p.m. for either the next day or the week, and by about 7:30 they'll be sent the details of their carpool ride if there's a match. Todd says they're trying to make it as simple as possible.
In terms of the logistics, it it basically happens by matching people that are starting from the same suburb and going around about the same time. So there's a central hub pickup spot in each of the suburbs that we've picked.
And I guess, okay, things like COVID, we're obviously all masked up. How does that play into this? You know, you're matching strangers up with strangers.
Yeah, it's actually been super fascinating. A lot of people have sort of got this heightened COVID anxiety around going on public transport because it's a lot less traceable. You're potentially on a bus with 50 people that you don't know rather than being in a car with 2 or 3 people that you don't know. So yeah, it's been really interesting to watch that. So we've got a policy at Hitch that we are following the government guidelines. Obviously everyone's got to be masked up. We've got a record of who's been in the car, so it's all nice and traceable.
On the streets of Wellington, people say there's an appeal to carpooling. This man's open to switching his bus pass for a car seat.
Oh, if I could find someone to carpool, yeah, I would. I don't drive myself, so it's not... Yeah.
So you'd need someone with a car?
Yeah.
Well, obviously the reduction in emissions and cost savings for everyone involved.
Many think there are too many empty cars.
Generally, you see a lot of people where it's only one person in the car.
Do you think too many people drive their cars, especially one person in a car?
Around Wellington CBD, yeah, definitely, big time.
Definitely.
So is carpooling the future of commuting? The Hitch pilot programs are underway in the Greater Wellington region for a few more weeks, and if all goes well, they're hoping to launch properly next year.
Definitely recommend checking out that video from Jake and Angus. It'll be on our webpage. What do you make of carpooling? Would you give it a crack? Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. How many people are in your car when you go to work, by the way? I'm interested in that too. A chatter of parakeets can be heard at Auckland Zoo, rare ones at that. 11 kakariki karaka, or orange-fronted parakeets, have been hatched there in the past few weeks, and more are expected. They're Aotearoa's rarest parakeet, and the super special chicks aren't naturally found in the super city, with their usual home much further south. Auckland Zoo birdman Carl Ashworth explains how the chicks are doing.
They're doing really well, yeah. We're really pleased with their progress. The parents are very good parents, so they're getting well fed.
So what makes them good parents other than turning up with food?
Well, it's quite a long incubation process. So the parents are pretty well bonded, and that's very helpful. And there's a lot of mouths to feed, so they definitely take it in turns to help each other out. And the male also feeds the female. So yeah, it's quite a team effort.
So you've got 11 at the moment, is that right?
Yeah, we've got 11 chicks. Yeah, so they're all doing really well. They are all different ages, but the oldest is probably a couple of weeks.
And they've all come from the same breeding pairs?
So it's 2 breeding pairs that have had, so it's 11 between 2 breeding pairs.
Is that a good number of chicks? Is that normal?
That's pretty average, yeah. And they can also go and have 2 or 3 clutches a season if they start early enough. So they can be pretty prolific if they, in the right conditions.
So how significant is this? Because they're quite precious, aren't they?
Oh, it's very significant, yeah. I mean, we think there's around 360 in the wild, so not huge numbers. And we'd love to get those numbers up, and the hope, would be that there will be different populations that are thriving around New Zealand.
So the small birds, the chicks, what do they look like at the moment? Are they bright and colourful yet, or when does that happen?
Not quite yet, no. They're kind of like little bald old men at the moment. They look a bit strange. So they'll slowly get their feathers over a period of a few weeks, and just before they fledge, and then they'll be fully feathered. But they can't kind of fully fly then. They can kind of, but they're kind of finding their feet.
Bald old men, Carl.
Yeah, that's quite a thing to say, isn't it?
It's a showstopper. So what's your job here? Do you just keep a watchful eye, or is there any intervention?
So we don't do intervention unless it's absolutely necessary. So we even set up cameras inside the nest box so we don't have to disturb them, so we can see it on a screen, so we can make sure everything's, good from the outside, if that makes sense. But we do a health check on them, and we put bands on them when just before they're about to fledge, so that we know the individuals. once they're out the nest box, because obviously they all look the same. So we can differentiate them, and then we know who everybody is.
So there are very few of these particular parakeets, and, well, Auckland's not their natural home. So what happens to them when they're fully grown? Do they get released into the wild?
They do, yeah. So that's, one of the great things about working for Auckland Zoo is that we are involved in many different projects, but this is one of them. So with the Department of Conservation and also Isaac's Conservation and Wildlife Trust in Christchurch. So we send the birds down to Christchurch before release, and they deal with them before. It's like a pre-release. It's called hardening. So it's just getting them used to what will be happening to them in the wild. So different feeding regimes and things like that.
And what is their biggest threat?
Their biggest threat really is, rats and stoats. So the main culprits, unfortunately, for a lot of our birds in Aotearoa, that is the problem. So until we get, rid of these pests, then... But, it is happening, and there's a lot happening across New Zealand to eradicate those pest species.
For people who aren't familiar with these particular birds, can you describe them? What do they look like in all their finery?
So they're quite small green with a beautiful orange stripe across their head. So there's the red-crowned and yellow-crowned kakariki and then orange-fronted kakariki. They all look kind of similar, but the orange kakariki is the smallest of all three.
Now, I looked this up. I understand the collective noun for parakeets is a chatter of parakeets. So do these guys have a good bird song?
They do, yeah. It's kind of a real joyful noise. It's quite loud, and they're quite inquisitive. So every time you kind of walk past the aviary, they make the noise, and they're kind of looking around to see what you're doing. But what they're really looking for is, are you bringing me some fresh papaya that I can eat? Because they are obsessed with it.
Yeah, so what is a treat for them?
Papaya seeds. So they absolutely love papaya seeds. So anything with seeds, so tomato or kiwi fruit, anything they can kind of pick through and pick the seeds out is really what they want.
And that's the super cool birdman, Carl Ashworth from Auckland Zoo. Now, he reckons they look like little bald old men. If you're listening on radio, go on to our website. There's little pictures of them. They're cute. Let us know what you think.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Kia ora, I'm Marama Tipole. The Auckland District Health Board has become the first in the country to be 90% fully vaccinated. The city's two other DHBs are also closing in on the double dose target. Waitemata is at 87% and Counties Manukau at 84%. Kate Gregan reports.
Waitemata DHB needs more than 17,000 people to get their second dose to reach 90%. While Counties Manukau needs a further 30,000 people to get their second jab. The Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says it is a phenomenal achievement and that everyone owes a debt of gratitude to Aucklanders. 9 DHBs have now vaccinated at least 90% of their eligible population with their first doses, including the 3 in Auckland, Mid-Central, Capital and Coast, Hutt Valley, Wairarapa, Canterbury and Southern.
A Bay of Plenty iwi is worried about Christmas holidaymakers to the region will put locals at risk from COVID-19. There are 6 new cases of the virus in the Bay of Plenty today, and a local school linked to one of the cases was closed. Te Whānau-ā-Apanui spokesman and Opotiki District Councillor Louis Rapihana told Checkpoint the iwi is asking visitors to stay away.
Everyone who doesn't have bloodlines to Te Whānau-ā-Apanui lands, and the lands are from Hawaii right through to Potikirua, which is the longest coastline within the Opotiki district. And that's to ensure the safety of not only our people at home, but those that are travelling as well.
Louis Rapihana says holidaymakers should not travel unless they've been tested. As community COVID cases sweep into the lower North Island, health officials are taking vaccinations to the regions. Mid-Central and iwi health workers are this evening running a vaccination clinic in Pongaroa in the Tararua district. Manawatu reporter Jimmy Ellingham is there.
At the Pongaroa Hotel, Friday night drinks are underway. And in a room behind the bar,
Health workers are vaccinating locals from the village, about 90 minutes drive from Palmerston North. 34 people are booked in tonight, almost a week after 2 community cases were confirmed in the Tararua district in Woodville. People I've spoken to say it's convenient to have the clinic coming to them, and everyone at the Pongaroa Hotel agrees. They don't want COVID here. Mid-Central has hit 90% for first doses. The Tararua district is at 86%.
Multiple investigations are underway into allegations of sexual assaults at Waikeria Prison and claims a corrections officer failed to report serious complaints from inmates. 2 prisoners say they were attacked multiple times by other inmates at the men's jail near Te Awamutu. Amnesty International Executive Director Meg Durand has told Checkpoint she's horrified but not surprised. The Department of Corrections says it alerted police after it became aware of the allegations this week, and police have confirmed they're investigating. A West Auckland local board member is reassuring the community after a number of shootings in the area. 4 people have been charged with murder after father of 2, Robert Hart, was killed in New Lynn earlier this month, while another man was seriously injured when he was shot in Blockhouse Bay last week. The chair of the Faux local board, Kay Thomas, is noticing concerned people posting on social media and is calling for calm. The Australian Prime Minister has been criticised for failing to condemn the violence at anti-COVID restrictions protests in Melbourne. Here's the ABC's Noor Haider.
Scott Morrison has been accused of double-speak and dog-whistling after condemning the threats, while also saying he understands the frustrations of protesters. Opposition leader Anthony Albanese says it's not the time for word games.
The Prime Minister needs to clearly and unequivocally condemn the threats.
But Mr Morrison argues he has been clear.
I completely and totally and continue to denunciate any violence.
The Prime Minister has again reiterated sympathy for Australians frustrated by government restrictions and state mandatory vaccination rules.
Tim Paine has stepped down as Australia Test cricket captain after being investigated by Cricket Australia for sending inappropriate text messages to a female co-worker. The incident happened 4 years ago, and while he was cleared at the time, he says he's decided to step down as the texts were about to become public.
I'm deeply sorry for the hurt and pain that I've caused to my wife, my family and to the other party, and I believe that it is the right decision for me to stand down as captain. I've loved my role and it's been the greatest privilege of my sporting life. I'm grateful for the support of my teammates. To them I ask for their understanding and forgiveness.
Paine's resignation comes just 3 weeks before the first Ashes test against England in Brisbane. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Country Life checks out what else comes out of the Welsh valleys, apart from coal. Cream. Constable Keith, road safety campaigner from the 80s, selects a mixtape for the 2020s. The Bellbirds are this week's Friday Night Live act. And because the Kellogg's Pop-Tart turns 56 today, and it apparently is a very popular tart, we've got a Sonic Tonic dedicated to pastry on Nights, making plenty of dough with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday for Northland, fine, but isolated afternoon and evening showers both for today and tomorrow. The western North Island from Auckland to Wellington, including Coromandel and Taumaranui, mostly fine. Some areas of cloud though. For Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taihape, also Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, generally fine with a few areas of cloud. However, isolated showers today and tomorrow, some possibly heavy with thunderstorms. Bulla, Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury fine. Some areas of cloud from this evening. Otago and Southland fine with increasing high cloud today. Scattered rain developing tomorrow morning. For Westland, cloud increasing. Isolated showers developing this afternoon, turning to rain south of the glaciers tomorrow morning with some heavy falls. And for Fiordland, mostly cloudy, a few showers about the fjords, turning to rain everywhere tonight. Some heavy falls for tomorrow. And for the Chatham Islands, partly cloudy. It's coming up to 7 minutes past 6.
Nā mihi marama no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A South Island mayor wants the Trans-Tasman bubble reinflated, saying Aucklanders pose a similar COVID risk as Australian travellers. From the 15th of December, fully vaccinated people will be able to travel across the Auckland border freely, while those unvaccinated will need a negative COVID-19 test. Kiwis can skip across the ditch quarantine-free, but they're faced with fighting for a highly sought-after spot in managed isolation on the way back home. Tess Brunton has more.
Queenstown Lakes Mayor Jim Bolt says businesses are delighted and ready to roll out the welcome wagon for Aucklanders this summer. They typically account for 60% of the town's domestic market, but he says they've got some extra room he'd like Aussies to fill.
So we really are surviving on crumbs at the present point in time. That said, we're delighted to have those crumbs out of the rest of the South Island and North Island that's allowed to travel. But having the Australians here and having our friends from Auckland here would make a massive difference to the businesses in this town who are really struggling to survive at this stage.
He wants to know why fully vaccinated Australians aren't allowed back in as well.
I don't see a hell of a lot of difference between somebody coming out of Sydney and somebody coming out of Auckland. COVID is rife in both cities. It's going to be a long time before they get rid of it. If a Sydney sider is vaccinated and has a very recent COVID negative test, then I can't see too much reason why they can't come here.
The opening of the Trans-Tasman bubble back in April was described as a light at the end of a very grim tunnel, but it was grounded in late July. Months on and starved of Aucklanders and international visitors, Jim Bolt says it's time to welcome them back.
Perhaps coming out of Australia, maybe a compulsory saliva test at the airport would be a really good thing because you get the results back from those very quickly and they're pretty accurate. So that would satisfy, I think, the requirements of most people in our district.
Aotearoa Canopy Tours General Manager Paul Button says Jim Bolt has a fair point if it can be done safely.
If it can be done by maintaining the guidelines and maintaining the you've got the traffic light system, if we can maintain that and be consistent and deliver it safely, what would be holding us back?
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern offered no further certainty about when the Trans-Tasman bubble may be on the cards.
Really encourage people to look at some of these stages separately. Of course, we've said that from the very beginning of our reconnecting work that there will be emphasis on supporting the ability of New Zealanders and residents to move. The idea or the issue of when people who are coming into New Zealand as tourists, that is not our first tranche. We are really focusing on citizens and residents.
So far, the government says it's not looking at international border changes this side of Christmas.
The Prime Minister's made her first trip to the South Island since Delta arrived on New Zealand's shores, today visiting Christchurch to push the vaccine message. Jacinda Ardern was in Woolston, not far from several locations of interest visited by one of Christchurch's 2 current COVID-19 cases. Our reporter Rachel Graham and cameraman Nathan McKinnon have the story.
The car park of Woolston New World serving a different purpose today, with marquees and a camper van filling the spaces and providing shelter for those getting their COVID vaccine. At the clinic, Miss Ardern met a deaf woman who wanted to show off her vaccination card and wish Miss Ardern Merry Christmas in sign language. The supermarket's owner, Simon Turnbull, says many of their customers travel by bike or foot, so he knew the pop-up clinic at the supermarket would be useful to some.
A lot of them first shots as well, and it was really hadn't had it because they hadn't had the opportunity to go somewhere to get it. Other people you speak to and they haven't been able to have time off work or busy with families and haven't had a chance, and they've literally come out of the shopping and gone, I need my second jab, I'll shoot in. So to me, anything we can do like that to help make a difference, it's a no-brainer.
High school student Jan Goldsworthy is working at the pop-up clinics part-time and says they see an upswing in vaccinations each time a new case is identified nearby.
It's like you get to see on the news the vaccination case and you think, yeah, you're part of it, so it's really nice.
The pop-up clinics are managed by Wayne Thompson from the Canterbury District Health Board. They have 6 mobile camper vans plus several large marquees, which are travelling around Canterbury to set up at sports grounds, community groups and supermarkets.
Yesterday we had 47 people to take their vaccination, 17 of which was dose 1, so that's really positive. And today we started at 12 and there were a couple in the queue, so we've already done about 12 or 15 already, but it sounds a small number, but that's actually huge, and it's great because it's locally, people like to go where they know.
With the Auckland boundary set to drop on the 15th of December, Jacinda Ardern promises the measures in place should reduce the risk to the South Island.
For the South Island, they'll actually have checks of everyone travelling via flights and the inter-islander, so that gives an added level of reassurance for the South. One thing I will say though is that throughout this outbreak, and we've seen that, despite having protections in place, we have seen the movement of some cases. So yes, we can slow it, but we also need to be prepared. That's what our new COVID protection framework helps with too.
The whole country will move to the traffic light framework sometime after 29th of November.
Community nerves are running high in West Auckland after 2 shootings in as many weeks. 4 people have been charged with murder after father of 2, Robert Hart, was shot dead in a Newland driveway earlier this month, while another man was critically injured after being shot in Blockhouse Bay last week. While some residents are worried, a local board member says the situation is under control. Jean Bell reports.
Blockhouse Bay resident Penelope Hart says she's going about her day-to-day life a little more on guard.
It's always in the back of your mind. You're walking around in your subconscious, you know several people have been shot.
Newland local Dilip Mahoon thinks he's noticed an increase in violence in his time in the neighbourhood.
Well, I lived here for about 25 years. It never used to happen before. Should not have happened.
Doreen Law says Auckland is a big city.
Just not Newland, is it? I mean, it happens out south too.
Helen McMillan is used to the scream of sirens and the police helicopter thrumming overhead.
In some ways it doesn't surprise me. I'm not particularly worried, but there does seem to be sort of violence all over the place, and it has been quite a lot out west here.
Faux Local Board chairperson Kay Thomas is noticing people are more worried, but she thinks the community can handle it.
The terror incident at Countdown showed us that the community's resilient, supportive, supports each other, a very, very diverse community, and people step up to support each other when that's needed. But there is significant concern.
She says people are publicly expressing those concerns.
A lot of it's communicated through Facebook, as you can imagine, and people expressing worry that things are out of control in the area. They're not, but it can seem like that.
With more people at home due to the lockdown, she thinks police activity is more noticeable.
I think we're more aware of what's going on around us, and people are at home, so they're aware that the police helicopters are. So there is more awareness of what's happening, especially during the day in the neighbourhood.
Ngāti Awhawuk, who lives in Avondale, thinks lockdown restrictions have added fuel to the fire.
Especially this lockdown, yeah. There's been more violence. It gets to you mentally, so. Because there have been robberies and, like, the dairies down my street as well and stuff like that, yeah.
Faux Local Board chairperson Kay Thomas agrees.
The pandemic is creating lots of stress on families and individuals that are probably already stressed. The pandemic and the uncertainty adds to their stresses.
She says the police are working hard to keep the community safe. We asked for an interview with local police, but this request was declined.
It is 6:15. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. $10 million have been set aside to develop a vaccine for strep throat, a precursor to rheumatic fever and rheumatic heart disease. Last year, more than 100 people were hospitalised for the first time with rheumatic fever, mostly Maori and Pacifica children. New Zealand is one of the few developed countries to still have the preventable illness so prevalent in the community. Emma Hatton reports.
Someone with rheumatic heart disease has walked into Porirua GP Annie Judkin's clinic every week for the last 20 years.
We see loads of patients who have got rheumatic heart disease. They've had heart valve replacements as a result of their rheumatic heart disease. We've got group A strep nephritis, which goes on in some people to cause renal failure.
She says almost exclusively it's Maori and Pacifica children and teenagers.
He had 2 leaky valves, both his mitral and his aortic valve were leaky, and we tried for a week or two and gave him medications to support his heart, and he went home, but a week later he came back, he was in increasing heart failure, so at 4 years of age he had to go to Auckland and get both his aortic and his mitral valve replaced.
She's describing open heart surgery for a 4-year-old. For the last 10 years, first-time hospitalisations for the fever have been stubbornly high at around 170 admissions, but in the most recent year dropped dramatically to just over 100. The Associate Health Minister, Aisha Verrill, who is a former infectious diseases doctor, says scientists are looking into why this is and if there are links to the increased health measures brought about by COVID. She says while COVID has taken up a lot of resources lately, rheumatic fever hasn't been forgotten by health officials.
We need to be working on every front, and that's why in addition to the work we have underway, working with Whānau to make sure that people with rheumatic fever are well cared for, that we're swabbing sore throats, we're also looking for what could be a game changer intervention, and a vaccine would be precisely that.
University of Auckland will lead the work next year in collaboration with Australian researchers. The funding will go towards surveillance of the strep A bacteria that causes strep throat, lab testing infrastructure and preparation for clinical trials. Another Associate Health Minister, Alpito Williams-Seo, jokes his experience with the disease as a young active teenager stopped him pursuing a rugby league career, but joking aside, recalls the harrowing ordeal.
For 3-4 months, and then even after I left hospital, I had a regime of taking penicillin on a regular basis. I couldn't participate in sports all of that whole year. I missed out on school. As the oldest child of 9 children, I had responsibilities with the younger ones that I couldn't undertake.
Ministry of Health data shows in the year to June, first-time rheumatic fever hospitalisation rates for Māori and Pacifica were about 4 times the national rate. The incredibly inequitable disease begins often with a sore throat, but can also be a skin infection or achy joints. However, often by the time symptoms persist enough to be checked, the damage is done. Minister Verrill says the solution is twofold: a vaccine, but also ending child poverty and substandard overcrowded housing. She says all going to plan, a strep throat vaccine would ideally be rolled out alongside others in the national immunisation schedule.
Cantabrians are hoping the end is in sight for a major post-quake build as contractors work around COVID construction delays. One of Christchurch's main post-quake anchor projects, Parakeets, or the Metro Sports Facility, is expected to be one of the best in New Zealand. Reporter Kim Moody has the story.
For the swimming Canterbury West Coast Club, the country's largest aquatic centre can't open soon enough.
The hopes and dreams that are held for that facility, both by Swimming Canterbury West Coast and by the City Council itself, if those come to fruition, it's going to be absolutely amazing and, as I say, make a huge impact on the whole community in terms of people wanting to swim and give it a go.
Debbie Rahu says 2 generations of Canterbury swimmers have now been training in less than ideal conditions, but they've risen to the occasion. The Central City lot, stretching over more than 30,000 square metres, will have everything sporty residents could want. A 50-metre, 10-lane competition swimming pool, a separate diving pool, 5 hydroslides, an aquatic leisure centre, 9 indoor courts, fitness spaces, and seating for up to 2,500 people. Nigel Cox, the council's head of recreation and sport, says it will jumpstart the region's sporting competitions.
Local competition, regional competition, national and international competitions will all be able to go ahead again. And I think in terms of just the size of this facility, it's massive, but it's going to be the best in New Zealand, if not Australasia.
And it's been a long time coming. Christchurch's QE2 facility and its 50-metre competition pool was built for the 1974 Commonwealth Games, but damaged beyond repair in the 2011 earthquakes. Parakeets been plagued with delays. Originally expected to be completed in 2016, a $75 million budget blowout saw a deal with the preferred contractor axed by the government. The $301 million project is now managed by Crown rebuild company Aotearoa. Chief Executive John Bridgman says they're on track to open in early 2023, but COVID has seen them hit a few snags.
For example, pools out of Italy, hydroslides out of Australia, heating system out of Australia.
and those take specialist resources to put together and install on the site. And so border controls are quite an issue.
He says it's like a jigsaw puzzle, booking in overseas specialists, nabbing them an MIQ spot and matching up the flights while dealing with delays from local lockdowns. Debbie Rahu says the lack of adequate facilities has meant the clubs had to hold competitions in Dunedin or Wellington at considerable cost. But she says the last lap is hopefully within sight.
If you build it, they will come. They will get national meets here, which means that we will get some of the fastest athletes in the country racing here. If we get an international meet here, we will get some international athletes competing here. And there's nothing that draws people into a sport like being able to see people they admire doing a fantastic job of it.
A long wait, hopefully worth it for the current and future sports stars.
Schools in New South Wales are in the midst of a staffing crisis, partly due to teachers needing to be vaccinated to work in classrooms. But it's hoped a new program aimed at steering students into a teaching career could plug the shortfall in the longer term. Here's the ABC's Gavin Coote in Australia.
His school is less than 3 hours from Sydney and is in a large regional city with plenty of amenity. But Principal Ken Barwick's never found it more difficult to fill teaching positions.
Look, it's very, very unusual for Bathurst. Bathurst is a vibrant community. It's nearly 50,000 people and it's nothing that we would have ever experienced. We're not that far west, but we really are starting to struggle in areas that we've never struggled before. There was a plethora of PE teachers and English teachers just 3 years ago, and now we can't find an English teacher to fill a vacant position.
Ken Barwick thinks while COVID hasn't helped, the teacher drought began before this, and it's across the board for all educational roles.
Particularly at that higher executive level too, there's been a considerable drop-off in people wanting to do leadership in schools and to go west as well. You know, the big areas of concern for me are those technical and applied trade areas, and the science and maths and English, the core areas, are starting to really struggle as well.
It will take some fixing, and the New South Wales government knows this. It's been looking at creative solutions, among them scouting from within the classroom and luring them into a teaching career. Sarah Mitchell is the New South Wales Education Minister.
And it's about identifying high-performing high school students who might be interested in a career in teaching, getting them into schools in a student learning support officer role for a period of 12 months after they finish school to get that experience of working in a school, and then support them to go on and study their initial teacher education degree and come back to a regional school.
The program will be piloted across a number of regional schools from next year and would require people to return to the country following their studies.
When you look particularly at the moment with COVID and the way that people have been able to show that you can really live and work anywhere, you know, we want to make sure that we have the best possible teachers in the bush, but also targeting people who already know what a great lifestyle it is to live in regional New South Wales. That's one of the driving forces behind this new initiative.
A jet-set Christmas might be off the cards, but a jetpack one still could be. A Trade Me bidding war is raging over the chance to own a piece of New Zealand history and become the proud owner of one of 2 Martin jetpacks on offer. Our visual journalist in Christchurch, Nate McKinnon, went to inspect the goods.
3, 2, 1.
These jetpacks have liftoff. Up for auction on Trade Me. They are in hot demand and cost a pretty penny. Bids on the Martin Jetpack prototype number 10 have climbed over $4,000, and the top bid on the Martin Jetpack P12.3 is a cool $36,200. That's music to the ears of Sam Brown and his team at Skylark Asset Realisation, who are running the auctions.
There is, I think, about 1,200 watches on the P10 on Trade Me now and about 950 on the 12.3. So, yeah, there's a lot of interest out there. I think it's the second most I've seen in my $45 million in sales on Trade Me.
And there's good reason too. These jetpacks are from the Martin Aircraft Company, started out of a Christchurch shed by Glenn Martin in the 80s. It took 27 years to develop the first single-person aircraft, but several prototypes and millions of dollars later, Martin resigned in 2015. The company went into liquidation in March this year, and now a piece of New Zealand's aviation history is up for sale.
It would be one of the most interesting I've personally ever run. I've run, I do radio frequency auctions for the government, and one of those several years ago went to I think $17 million. So that on trade means that was reasonably exciting. We sold a MiG-21 jet fighter a few years back, and that was also really interesting. But I kind of feel that for me, just the Kiwi roots of this, the kind of, this is what a guy can build in his back shed if he's really keen, just makes this much, for me, I guess, almost the pinnacle, actually, of what I've done so far.
Trade Me customers can see the potential, clear from this question by Nick662. Is it quiet enough for me to wear a bat cape and surprise attack the bad guys? Or do you think they'll hear me a mile away? Unfortunately for Nick662 and wannabe vigilantes, you won't be able to fly these at all.
It is merely an ornament. It's just a beautiful man cave object.
If the jetpack is too steep for you, there are other trinkets on offer.
We have online at the moment, there's lots of Martin jetpack collector's items. So there's coasters and cups and posters, and there's 920 items.
The jetpacks were originally marketed towards first responders, and that dream might not be completely over. An international tender ended last week with all the intellectual property, technology and current model jetpacks getting snapped up.
We can't reveal any information about the buyer or the price or any of that commercially sensitive stuff, but we can say that the whole lot of it has gone to one entity, and it looks very likely that they have the resources to continue development. So, something will come of it. Hopefully we'll see Martin jetpacks flying around the skies someday in the future.
The Martin Jetpack P10 auction ends at 8:30 p.m. this Sunday, while the model P12.3 ends on Tuesday at 7:40 p.m. It's likely bids will go through the roof.
Well, that's a mighty expensive ornament, isn't it? Do check it out online. Nate McKinnon filmed that story. The video will go up on our webpage. A lot of you getting in touch about various things on the program this evening on the subject of carpooling. Deb says, haha, not stuck in traffic, stuck in a border crossing queue. Fun times living around Auckland. Over it, says Deb. And another listener says, kia ora, I think the carpooling service is a brilliant idea. In Wellington and Lower Hutt, it's too dangerous to cycle and public transport is too unreliable and expensive. So I drive. Usually it's just me in the car. And Glenn's got in touch to say, so cool to hear about the C Company aircraft. Those are the aircraft flying to Gisborne to encourage people on the east coast to get vaccinated, and also the pub in Pongaroa, all doing the mahi to get vaccinations out in rural New Zealand. And on an interview that we did earlier in the show with Louis Rapihana from Te Whānau-ā-Apanui, they're asking people who don't whakapapa to the iwi to stay out of their tribal territory over summer because of COVID concerns. This person says they have the right to limit people coming into their tribal territory. COVID is a serious risk to everybody at this time. It is not too much to ask for visitors to make alternative plans this year. Be kind, they say. Another person says, Pākehā 100% support iwi and hapu leaders' requests for people to stay away from particular parts of New Zealand while they get their communities safe and vaccinated. It is totally reasonable request, and I hope people respect it. On the parakeets born at Auckland Zoo, this person's got in touch to say, as a bald old man, I am delighted to be compared to such a beautiful, beautiful songbird. Have a fantastic weekend. See you next week.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Mayor Phil Goff says Auckland is on track to become one of the most vaccinated cities in the world after the Auckland DHB reached 90% full vaccination. Eastern Bay of Plenty iwi Te Whānau-ā-Apanui is asking those who do not whakapapa to the iwi to keep away from its rohe this summer. Tim Paine has stepped down as Australia Test cricket captain after being investigated by Cricket Australia for sending inappropriate text messages to a female co-worker. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
In my dreams, I would have loved to have got up to Ahipara to enjoy the dunes and the water. It's such a beautiful area, but under the circumstances, I think it wouldn't be the right decision.
Live with local, national and international stories and some music with your news.
When we saw all the people up in the windows dancing and tapping on the glass and holding up signs saying thank you, it actually felt quite amazing.
Lately with Karen Hay every weeknight from 10 on RNZ National.
Kia ora, Karen, and I'm Brian Crump, getting ready for another night on RNZ National. And tonight, it's Friday night, so it's Sonic Tonic night. And this week's Sonic is dedicated to pastry, because on this day in 1965, Kellogg's in the United States launched one of the most successful, most mass-produced pastry